You asked and we're answering. Whether you attended one of our PADS Professional Signal Integrity Analysis webinar events live or watched the recording on demand, some great questions were asked, so let's get the answers. Hi there, I'm John McMillan and welcome to the 7th podcast in the special series of PCB Tech Talks, the After the Webinar series. In this special podcast series, I'm joined by webinar presenters as we answer and discuss the questions submitted by attendees during our recent webinars. As always, be sure to subscribe to this podcast and let us know the topics you'd like to discuss, and if you'd like to be our guest right here on PCB Tech Talk. Today, I'm joined by the Signal Integrity Analysis webinar presenter, Shivani Joshi. Hi, Shivani, and welcome to PCB Tech Talk.
Hey, John, it's great to be here.
It's your first time, right?
It is a little nervous, but I'm excited.
Well, great. Well, welcome. Awesome webinar, by the way. It was very well attended in both European and US sessions. So that went very well. We have a lot of great questions to go through from actually both sessions. And but first, tell us a little bit about yourself. That's your first time here. So we always like to start out with a little bio of yourself.
Of course, yeah. So my name is Shivani Joshi. I have an electrical engineering degree from Purdue University. I kind of had a focus all throughout college towards power electronics. So things like hyperlinks that kind of focus on power and signal integrity was really eye-capturing for me. And that's kind of where I put my focus in my time here at Mentor.
So what's exciting to you about power electronics and high-speed stuff?
Well, I mean, it's just the idea of how, power can come from these big plants and come into your house, and just the way that you can adjust power. It's not just, turning on a switch. It's not just, throwing in a resistor. There's so many different ways to get so many different results. And that was always intriguing to me all throughout college and beyond. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's awesome. What was your favorite class in college? Your teachers probably listen to this podcast, by the way.
I would have to say probably art appreciation. It was a really random class, but very fun, very different. Well,
we're going to follow up on the questions as promised from the webinar session. And as folks have already seen emails out to the on-demand session, and we're going to address questions that were asked in both the European, US sessions alike during this podcast. Without further ado, I'm going to jump in the first one. The first one is, how do I know my design needs SI analysis? And the answer to that is there are several things that can indicate the potential for SI issues. High-speed signals, for example, high frequency, long traces becoming transmission lines. So naturally, if your design is high-speed, it has differential pairs, issues with EMI, crosstalk, and signal reflections, it needs to be analyzed for SI to catch and correct and avoid respins that result. So you make sure the PC doesn't get fabbed without doing those checks. So if your design has DDR SerDes, for example, you're going to need SI analysis. Very good question. You want to take a few, Shivani?
Sure. Yeah. So this question is, so now do I have to convince my manager to pay extra for signal integrity analysis? And for what I've shown here, it comes in the PADS Professional Suite. So the hyperlinks is not an extra paid for feature. It's all there at no extra cost, and it enables you to save time and money. So you're able to, assess your designs and be more proactive on those more tricky nets. So, that's always kind of a good feature to have in as you're doing your designs, and you're more than welcome to try it out yourself since there is a free evaluation on the website now.
Cool. So, on the subject of managers, the next one is, what are the cost savings in performing SI analysis that my manager needs to know about? And this is a really good question. I actually saw some comments on a LinkedIn post that was actually promoting this SI webinar from PCB designers asking just this thing. So the cost savings is big when you consider the cost of a design respin. So managers are very typically interested in meeting manufacturability, cost, and time to market goals, especially in competitive markets. So imagine eliminating a prototype build used to identify issues and the added cost and design rework and the additional board spin. Also, imagine a PCB design to production fab cycle that is set to 12 weeks. Can be, obviously, if it can be reduced to 8, that's great because the prototype was eliminated, and that's 4 weeks of a designer's time that could be spent on other projects. So achieving first pass design success should be a really great goal and of great interest to a manager. Obviously, just eliminating one prototype build is huge.
Yep, that's right. I can take the next one. Can you import or export hyperlinks files, and can I view what I'm analyzing? So as I showed, there were two parts of hyperlinks. So there's line sim and board sim. And so you can save each of these into their own file format. So line sim ends up as a .ffs file. Board sim is a .hype file. And they'll just work within the hyperlinks tool, but you can always save, review, and share the batch analysis report that I showed towards the end of the webinar. And you'll have the option to save them and send these reports off as Excel or HTML format. So it makes it a lot easier to share within your group and just keep everybody informed on the different changes you're making and how it's affecting the signal integrity of your board.
All right, very good. Why don't you take a few more?
So another one here is how can I access the video resource for download? So this webinar is actually put on the website. There'll be a link there. If you go into pads.com into the resources section, there should be a signal integrity webinar recorded and ready for you to view there.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. If you attended it or actually registered for it, you're going to get an email with the on-demand link. But for the people who have subscribed and may not have attended or registered for that event, like Shivani said, you can go straight to pads.com and you'll see it. Actually, I think it's on the front carousel of pads.com right now. That's good to know.
So some more from the EU session. There were some requests to show eye diagrams for any of the serial interfaces, and PADS Professional's version of hyperlinks doesn't have the eye diagram option, but there are more resources on the full hyperlinks version, which does have eye diagram options. So if you go into the resource center of the hyperlinks on mentor.com's website, you'll be able to find some more information there. So the version of hyperlinks that is included within PADS Professional is a little bit stripped down so that you're able to do really quick analyses for designs of that type. But if you want the full-fledged one, yeah, that is a separate tool. Although you can access the full hyperlink suite within PADS Professional.
So I'm going to take one. When do I perform SI analysis? And that's a really great question, because if you haven't done SI analysis, you may want to know, is it pre or is it a post layout or pre-schematic? SI analysis leads itself perfectly to that left shift design methodology we talk a lot about here, which is to analyze the design and resolve issues throughout the design flow versus like in a linear design flow, do this, then that, then that, and that. So SI analysis should be done pre-layout to make sure things like trace lengths and widths and topologies are set to ensure design success, and then again as a post-layout validation to ensure issues are resolved prior to PCB fab. So the right answer is both pre-layout and post-layout. Got another one, Shivani?
Yep. So one was how to find maximum frequency of a track. So you can run the sweep manager on your design and be able to set the different sweeps of frequency. So that way you're able to see how the signal is going to behave and then accordingly adjust your design frequency. So is it possible to select the PCB material properties and then simulate temperature variations? So in the version of hyperlinks that I showed, I was just showing the signal integrity portion, but there is a thermal and power aspect to it. To be able to do a more accurate thermal analysis, though, you'll need to have FlowTherm XT, which integrates within the PADS Professional suite. I have another question here. Where do you get signal integrity models? And that one's a really important question because that's kind of how you're going to set up your analyses, and that's how the system knows what you're trying to model exactly. And so by signal integrity models, I'm assuming that these users mean IBIS models that you can get for your components. And in the PADS Professional install, we actually have some models assigned. So you can create and import different IBIS models from suppliers, but there are some IBIS models already in the install. And then we also have a built-in easy IBIS wizard, which is where you can actually go in and edit these files, and you can also create your own IBIS models.
Oh, very good. So here's a great question. Someone asked, how much is PADS Professional? Well, I can tell you that. I don't normally talk about pricing, but it's $8,995 US, and you can see that on the front of pads.com. So that's the price. Another question was asking about training, which is a great question because we have just got a new program in place where we're doing free on-demand training, I think, for a year. So this is like walking you through classes where there's exercises and demos, and you can actually take tests and you can pass. And it's a really great program to learn and get started quickly. We do have on-demand training for many things.
So there were a couple other questions asking about the high-speed simulations that hyperlinks can achieve. So they were asking, kind of what the maximum is. And for hyperlinks, we can simulate about 50 gigahertz speed on your design. So there are some people that were talking about antenna design. So you'll be able to do most of those simulations within the tool. There was another question about how do I increase the power of a signal without modifying it? And that's a little bit more of a conceptual question, but you can try impedance matching. That'll help maximize power, or if you're just trying to minimize reflections, that should also help with that. Somebody mentioned that I had kind of gone through some of the components, and they were asking, what if I don't have a component in my library? And so our response to that is you can use the PartQuest library, which we have built into the PADS Professional tool set. And with that, you'll be able to easily access a huge library of parts. And from that, you can pull that into your project. If you also have a generic part, you can use that during analysis and then substitute a part later if your librarian, updates that at a later time.
I'll take another one now. So what about DRCs for items like high-speed nets crossing split planes? Does SI catch those? That's actually a good question, but you'll actually want to run electrical DRC on your designs to discover any layout electrical DRCs like nets crossing gaps. We actually had an electrical DRC specific webinar just a few months ago that demonstrated that process, that you can go to pads.com and watch on demand. It's actually part of this PADS Professional series we've done this year. I would encourage you, I think this was our 7th, right, Shivani?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yep.
Our 7th webinar of the year. So you can go back onto pads.com and be able to go back and listen and watch all the webinars on demand now. And all the Q&As, of course, on PCB Tech Talk, this podcast. So you can go back and subscribe, wherever you listen to podcasts, and we're on all of those. So be sure to go back and check that stuff out.
Definitely. There's some really great resources on all the places that John just mentioned. I'll take a couple other questions here, finishing up. So how did you pick the battery protection net that I chose to analyze? So that one that I chose at the beginning, it's not really the most engaging net, but I was mostly selecting something for demonstration purposes. The whole point of the webinar was just to cover some of the features and functionalities within line sim and board sim without really focusing on the problematic nets and actually solving all the problems. The goal was just to see what could be done. We do have other webinars on, again, the resources on pads.com and mentor.com that have more specific, let's solve this problem kind of videos. And those might be, kind of worth the watch and take some time to go through those, and you'll be able to find some good resources, I think, in there.
Great. Good to know. Do you have any more questions, Shivani? I'm done.
Yeah, no, looks like I'm through all the EU and the North America ones.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thanks for being here on PCB Tech Talk, and I'm looking forward to having you on a future episode.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Shivani, and thank you for joining me for this special After the Webinar Series podcast. For more information on this podcast, as well as a link to the on-demand replay of the webinar discussed, be sure to check out the show notes. There, you'll find additional information related to this podcast along with my email address, so feel free to send me your comments and questions or any topics you'd like to hear me talk about, or if you'd like to be my guest right here on PCB Tech Talk. I'm John McMillan. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app, and be sure to catch the next episode of PCB Tech Talk.